everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, we're going to be looking at the updated NHL playoff odds at FanDuel Canada, kind of checking out the 6 teams that are right on the bubble for each, the Eastern Conference and Western Conference. Obviously now 8 teams from each conference make it into the NHL playoffs, the top 3 from each division, and then there's 2 wildcard spots. So be looking at some of the teams that are currently in a playoff position that you look at the odds and they might not actually indicate that. That's one of the good things of looking at the sports books, because more often than not, the sports books are more right than our dumb brains. So it's good to kind of look at this kind of midway through the season, or I'd say maybe a quarter through the season, to kind of figure out where these teams stands and where your favorite team stands, and then we can figure out kind of which teams are the best ones to place bets on to make the playoffs right now, and which ones are the best to miss the playoffs. Let's get into today's video. All right, so let's take a look at the Eastern Conference first, looking at these 6 teams that are right on the bubble, or teams that are kind of, this odds are kind of bunched up right from that like 6 to like 10 spot right now. That's the Red Wings, the New York Islanders, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Philadelphia Flyers, Washington Capitals, and Ottawa Senators right now. So the Detroit Red Wings kind of lead the pack right now with the best odds at -111. And looking at their team, first wildcard spot right now with 34 points in 28 games played. Now, obviously in that Atlantic Division right now, a little bit more competitive than the Metro, I would say. Some of the teams in the Metro that we thought were going to be really good haven't really panned out just yet. Teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, the New Jersey Devils have had a relatively slow start to this season as well. So definitely a little bit concerning, I would say, if you're a fan of a team in the Atlantic Division, because there's a chance they don't really make it in to the playoffs. Because you look at a Red Wings team that has 34 points through 28 games played, and then the Capitals right now in the second wildcard spot too, with 31 points in 25 games played, and then the Islanders as well, second in the Metropolitan with just 33 points in 27 games. So obviously a little bit of a weaker division in the Eastern Conference right now, but this Red Wings team, I think they can still make the playoffs. I know at -111, they're a team that's definitely had a lot of puck luck, or a lot of luck go their way. Looking at their shooting percentage, they have the second highest shooting percentage in the NHL to start the year. Haven't really had like a ton of great goaltending. Alex Lyon has had some good stretches that has really helped this team, but their offense has just been working off scoring on not a ton of volume, but I would say a decent amount of quality scoring chances. Obviously, you have guys like Alex DeBrincat, Dylan Larkin, now the addition of Patrick Kane, and even looking down on this lineup, a guy like Daniel Sprong has a decent amount of goals too. JT Compher's been hurt, but he's been pretty solid there too, and then Joe Veleno. So I think this team has actually a decent amount of depth that people don't really consider depth, because I just don't think they know how good these players are just yet, but I think they're giving much better opportunities this year. So I think the Red Wings are a team that can definitely make it in the playoffs, and I don't think they're necessarily a bad bet at -111 right now. And looking at the Islanders, so I just mentioned the Islanders, second in the Metropolitan Division. This is a team I definitely do not think is going to make the playoffs. If you look at their analytics and kind of where they stand compared to the rest of the NHL right now, they're pretty much bottom 5 in every category. Corsi for percentage, which is shot attempt share, they're second to last in the NHL, only behind the San Jose Sharks in that stat. Expected goals for, they're 25th. Expected goals against, 29th. And then their shooting percentage is 16th in the NHL at about 10%. But the one thing that we've seen, Ilya Sorokin really he's played well, but he definitely hasn't played as well as we've seen him. But it's also because this Islanders team almost has a new identity now. I don't think we've ever seen this Islanders team give up as many scoring opportunities per game over the last 3 years. Certainly when Barry Trotz was there, obviously under Lane Lambert, I think the way this team has played has certainly shifted a little bit. We saw last year near the tail end of the year, and now this year much worse defensively than we've really ever seen this team over the past 5 seasons. So currently second in the Metropolitan with 33 points in 27 games played, and you'd think they'd have much better odds to make the playoffs being second in this hard conference, but it's -102 is not really reassuring. So I think the Islanders right now are actually a great bet to miss the playoffs, because I think they're playing way above their skis right now, are not a team that continue to play like this. And then looking at these next 2 teams, these are 2 teams I definitely think will be able to make it in the playoffs. The Pittsburgh Penguins, obviously a little bit of a slow start. Their power play has really not been good this year, but other than that, I think they're a very good group. You also look at their shooting percentage. They're bottom 4 in the NHL at about 9%. So I think this is definitely a team that can kind of right the ship, especially offensively. It's a newer group, a little bit of older bodies as well. So maybe it's just taking them a little bit more time to kind of get going here. Crosby is on an absolute tear. He's on his best goal pace right now since his 16-17 season. He's right now on pace for about 45 to 47 goals, which is obviously great to see. Jake Gensel's having a really good year as well. But currently 4 points out of a wild card spot. You can get them at +126 to make the playoffs. I think that's a great bet. And then the Flyers as well. I actually took the Flyers to make the playoffs back when they were about +600. I just think this team's playing really well under John Tortorella's kind of system, playing really well defensively, blocking a lot of shots. They're third in the NHL in expected goals against and limit teams in terms of scoring chance volume. We're seeing Carter Hart play pretty well, and even their backup Sam Ersson has actually surprised a lot of people. If you look at the month of November, he led all goalies in high danger save percentage, which is huge considering this team doesn't even give up a ton of high danger scoring chances at that point as well. So right now, third in the Metropolitan Division, are in a playoff spot and are plus 172, so I would still fire on that number as well. So looking at these last two teams, I think this is really interesting. The Capitals plus 215 to make the playoffs right now, but they're the second wild card spot, 31 points in 25 games played. I just think this team is completely fraudulent right now. You look Corsi for percentage, they're 28th in the NHL. Expected goals for and expected goals against, both outside the top 15, right around the 19th and 18th spot in both of those categories. Their shooting percentage relatively low, so it's not like they're scoring a ton, but I think throughout the month of November, Charlie Lindgren played absolutely insane and certainly helped them win games that they did not deserve to win. So I think that's why you see their odds at plus 215, because if you see a team that's currently in a playoff spot and is at plus 215, I think that's got to be, some red flags going off there, considering this is a team that is currently in a playoff spot, but their odds indicate that shouldn't necessarily be the case. So I think the Capitals will end up making the playoffs. We're not seeing the scoring that we've seen from teams or from this team in the past. Ovechkin certainly having an off year. Backstrom retired like 8 games into the season or is taking a step away from hockey. So you're relying on guys like Tom Wilson, Dylan Strome to really be your offense here. I don't know how well that will go later on into this season and as we're getting down to the playoff push. So I think the Capitals will miss. And honestly, right now, I think the biggest flyer you can take in the Eastern Conference to make the playoffs, the Ottawa Senators. They've played fewer games than I think any other NHL team right now, especially in the Eastern Conference. They've played just 23 games right now. They've barely played any road games as well, playing a ton of home games. 9 points out of a wild card spot. They're currently last in the Eastern Conference, but I think that's just mainly because they haven't played a ton of games. I still think this team's pretty solid. If you look at kind of their analytics and where they line up, they're pretty much top 12 in all the important categories. Expected goals for, expected goals against, top 12 in both of those categories. Brady Tkachuk is having a really good season. They've had some injuries at the beginning of the year. Obviously, Shabbat being out for a pretty long time now doesn't help, but I think they're pretty deep on D. If you look at guys like Jake Sanderson, Jacob Chychrun, even a guy like Artem Zub as well, I think is pretty solid to have as kind of that one of those last guys on your top 6 in terms of defensemen. So the Senators at plus 230, I think, are a great option. Their goaltending is definitely a little worrisome, but Anton Forsberg has certainly been playing a lot better recently. Korpisalo hasn't really fit into this new role or new team that he's been on yet, but I think as time goes on, he will start to play a lot better. So Senators plus 230. So if you're looking at these teams that we have here in the Eastern Conference, I think the 4 teams I think will make it are the Sens, the Flyers, the Penguins, and the Detroit Red Wings. NHL same game parlays are back on FanDuel this season. Offered in every single game, every single night. Unlike most books, you can include goals, points, and shots on goal. But the newest feature is the gift. Goal in the first 10 minutes. Looking at teams to target for the gift, here's the top 5 teams in goals per game last season. Here's a breakdown of goals in the first period from the 2021-22 season, as only 17% of games that season didn't have a goal in the first period. What will your NHL SGPs look like at FanDuel this season? All right, let's shift our attention here to the Western Conference now. Looking at the Western Conference, obviously the playoff picture is a little bit different because I think there's some teams that have certainly already solidified themselves as playoff teams. I would say it's a lot more top heavy and leaving a little less ambiguity for these teams that are kind of further down on the list. So looking at these 6 teams, we're going to pick 2 teams that are going to make the playoffs, and I think 4 of these teams will be on the outs. Just looking at wherever, like the Kings are definitely making the playoffs, the Avalanche, the Golden Knights. I still think the Oilers are going to make the playoffs. They're now like minus 400 to make the playoffs after their slow start. Have certainly been playing a lot better. I think they've won 7 or 8 games in a row now. So you can count the Oilers in for a playoff position as well, and then the Dallas Stars as well. Certainly will be a playoff team. So that's 5 teams right there. There's 2 teams out of this 6 bunch I think will make it. The Predators, currently in the first wildcard spot. I think this team's actually a lot better than people gave them credit for at the beginning of the year. Yusei Saros is starting to play absolutely unreal, especially since the month of December. I think he's probably been the best goalie in the NHL. Their offense, now that Andrew Brunette is their head coach, a guy that's definitely more offensive minded, I think that's perfect considering Barry Trotz is their GM and has that defensive minded focus as well. So when you're acquiring players, I think that certainly helps. And then Brunette can kind of just enforce a much more offensive style brand of hockey. And I think that'll work in their favor. Expected goals for in the NHL right now, they're 5th in the NHL. A team that plays really well 5-on-5 as well. So 32 points in 29 games played for the Preds. I think right now plus 120, they're still a great bet to make the playoffs. Looking at the Minnesota Wild, this is one team. Unfortunately, I think their slow start will hurt them too much. And I think they're playing really well right now, but maybe they're just kind of riding the fact that they have a new coach in John Hines after Dean Evison was fired about 2 weeks ago and now at this point. But as I mentioned, I think this team, their slow start will hurt them too much to be able to make a push for the playoffs. I still think they're a very solid team, and Philip Gustafson's a very good goalie, but I still don't think they have enough right now to make it inside of this playoff picture in the Western Conference. Looking at kind of where they stack up, their offense, I don't think is creating enough volume or quality scoring chances. I can't really put my finger on what's going on with this offense, considering they do have guys like obviously Matt Zuccarello's having a really good year, but apart from that, Kaprizov's had a really slow start to the year. Matt Boldy as well scored like his second goal of the year only like 2 weeks ago. He's obviously been playing a lot better since then. And then Joel Eriksson Ek, I think, has been a surprise, but other than that, I don't think they have enough offensive firepower, because you're looking at guys then like Connor Dewar to really score a lot, or Pat Maroon. I just don't really trust those guys really to be consistent offensive guys. They're having a solid output for this team. So the Wild right now plus 134 to make the playoffs. I think I'd pass on that. I don't think I necessarily bet them to miss the playoffs, because I don't think it's that sure of a thing, but I don't think they will end up making the playoff picture in this Western Conference right now. Looking at the Calgary Flames at plus 182, this is actually a bet I would consider making, considering obviously they had a slow start as well, but I actually think this team as a whole plays a lot better than Minnesota does. I think they're a lot deeper as well, looking at all their forward lines. Like their third line right now of Michael Backlund, Blake Coleman, and Jonathan Huberdeau, I actually think is playing a lot better. You know, a guy like Connor Zary, who's starting to play really well, playing on that top line with Kadri as well. You have a guy like Igor Sharangovich, who's just a great two-way forward, a guy who's scoring shorthanded goals and then doing the same thing on even strength as well. And then looking at their defensemen as well. I know they traded off Zadorov, but I still think, you have Noah Hanifin, Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson. I think those guys are really solid. And now maybe Dustin Wolf gets to play a little bit more. Dan Vladar has been really shit this year. So if Dustin Wolf starts to become a backup, or even if he's splitting time with Jacob Markstrom, I think that'll prove to help this Flames team a lot. 5th in the Pacific Division right now. Only 2 points out of a wildcard spot at plus 182. This is probably, if you didn't take them earlier, the best time you can get, or best price you can get on the Calgary Flames. All right, looking at these last 3 teams here, the Blues, Coyotes, and the Seattle Kraken, I think all these 3 teams will be missing the playoffs. The Blues, I don't think they have what it takes, obviously, right now. They just fired Craig Berube. I think this roster just kind of needs a little bit of an overhaul. I think they need to move one of their key pieces right now, whether it be Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou. I think they're a little too old on defense as well, with guys like Colton Parayko, Torrey Krug. I just don't think they really have what it takes to make the playoffs in the Western Conference. The odds kind of indicate that at plus 350. The Arizona Coyotes are definitely the most interesting line out of all of these 3 teams that we have here, because they're currently in the second wildcard spot, have had a very hot start to the year, but it's off 2 things. Like if you look at where they stand analytically, they should be pretty much like a bottom 6 team in the NHL, but they're not right now with 28 points in 28 games played. But their offense has been scoring at an insane rate, 3rd highest shooting percentage in the NHL at just around 12%. And then Connor Ingram was by far, actually, I would say, other than maybe Charlie Lindgren, the best goalie in the month of November. And even to start December as well, he's been playing really well. They've started to lose a couple games here, but I would think looking at their record and what they did in November and early December is just reliant on Connor Ingram playing out of his mind and then working off a shooting percentage that isn't necessarily consistent, considering they don't have the skill level to compete with that. Like, it's one thing to have a really high shooting percentage when you're, let's say, like the Edmonton Oilers. You have guys like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evander Kane, but Arizona Coyotes, I don't really have a ton of faith when you have a guy like Michael Charcone, who leads your team in goals with 13 goals. Like, he plays on your 3rd line, barely plays like 13 to 14 minutes a night, and is working off a shooting percentage of, I think, about 30% so far this year, with 13 or 14 goals under his belt. So if it was mainly relying on guys like Clayton Keller and even Logan Cooley, sure, I would maybe have a little bit more faith on this team being able to be more consistent to finish out this year, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think the Arizona Coyotes will not be a playoff team. And the fact that they're in a playoff spot right now, it's like the same thing as the Capitals. They're in a playoff spot right now, but they're plus 360 to make the playoffs. That doesn't really add up. I think it's more of a trap line there. So I would not look at this line or bet on them to make the playoffs. And then the Seattle Kraken, I think last year they got relatively lucky to make the playoffs. They obviously had a great playoff push because Grubauer was playing a lot better, but Grubauer regressed to the mean this year, certainly isn't playing the same level of hockey as we saw in the playoffs. Joey Daccord has by far been their best goalie so far this year, but their offense just isn't there. Last year, they led the NHL in 5-on-5 and goals for per 60, but if you look at their expected stats, they were bottom 10 in the NHL. So they were working off a really high shooting percentage, and I think a lot of people kind of expected them to kind of find that offensive blunder this year, or like a little bit of a wall, and we've seen it. To start the year, they were not able to score at all. It's been a little bit better, but they just snapped a 7-game losing streak, I believe, being the Florida Panthers 4-0. So these are skids they've gone through all year to start the year. I don't think like the guys who should be producing on offense, certainly aren't. Jaden Schwartz is out for a decent amount of time now. Jared McCann is really the only guy I think you can rely on to score consistently. Matty Beniers and definitely not having the same kind of year we saw after he just won the Calder Trophy. So Kraken at plus 440, I don't think you should even be giving them a consideration or a look, especially even right now. 25 points in 30 games played, 3 points out of a wildcard spot. I don't see them making like a big push for the Western Conference playoff picture. So the two teams I think are making the playoffs out of this bunch are the Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the updated NHL playoff odds. Do you think there's some teams that should be a little bit more favored to make the playoffs? Do you think there's some teams that don't even deserve to be in this conversation right now? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. Download the FanDuel Canada app. That link will be in the description below. And I'll see you guys in the next video for the Fantasy Hockey Mailbag.